Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Enterprise Dish. And you probably can't see Dux quite yet, and I gotta qualify this that Dux is always prepared. And Dux, where are you right now?
Look, man, as you can see the sign, I'm right outside the Brussels airport, next to the brand spanking new Microsoft Benelux headquarters here in Brussels, Belgium. I landed, I took a shower, I came out to do this video with you.
Dude, Dux is always prepared, and I always kind of joke about that. But I mean, he's got a tripod, he's got wireless audio and mics and all that set up. We kind of joke that he looked like he was giving the weather forecast of it to us from there. But I mean,
as you can see, today's gloomy and no sun here in Brussels.
So Dux, the obvious question is, well, where in the world are you today? We know you're in Brussels, but why are you in Brussels?
Great question. And I got to tell you, Microsoft Teams is blowing up around the world. I was in Asia a couple weeks ago, and this week I'm in Brussels. Tomorrow I'm in, Wednesday I'm in Amsterdam, and Thursday I'm in Stockholm to talk about how you ensure operational governance for Microsoft Teams. So meeting with customers, meeting with Microsoft, a lot of goodness around Teams.
And it's nuts. I mean, you are probably the most tangible asset I can align back to being like, hey, is Teams popular? And then I can be like, look at Dux. Physically look at him, because he will be in a new place seems like every week. I don't want to say pitching this stuff, but I think educating, I think, is the better word.
Yeah. And how to make it work, how to, really have organizations adopt this new way of working with Microsoft Teams, especially powered by SharePoint. There's just a lot of excitement, a lot of opportunities, to say the least.
Yeah, it's fun to watch this evolve. Which, Dux, this is one of my favorite things. This news came out, and I don't think a lot of people kind of realize this, but when Microsoft bought LinkedIn for $26.2 billion, which that's a real easy to remember, Dux, because you'll probably notice this too. That is the same thing as a marathon, 26.2. That's how I always remember how much they paid for LinkedIn. But they paid $26.2 billion. But LinkedIn is actually using G Suite. Yeah. So Microsoft's going to make a little bit of lemonade here. This popped up on a roadmap that says Microsoft's building a tool to make it easier to migrate from G Suite to Office 365. And Dux, you're a smart man. I bet you can figure out how they're going to, carve the wood, if you will, with that product, moving all those people from LinkedIn over.
Well, look, I don't think this is something that they're going to build from the ground up. As you recall, maybe last year or maybe a year and a half ago, the SharePoint team introduced a SharePoint migration tool already for SharePoint on-prem going to SharePoint online. I suspect it's going to be essentially an evolution of this tool, extending it to other platforms. G Suite, I can even say other file sync and share type of tools will be made available in the future.
Yeah, this is it'll be interesting to watch, and I'll be curious because there's been a lot of news on the Google camps, because Diane Green is no longer running that organization anymore on the cloud side, and they're bringing in an old Oracle fellow to kind of lead that up. But I don't have a good grasp on how many large organizations besides something like LinkedIn. I believe Verizon is running G Suite, but I'm curious about how many actually like enterprise grade customers there actually are out there running that at scale.
There's actually, you'd be surprised, there's actually a couple of large customers in the organization running G Suite. So for example, I know U.S. government agency GSA is using G Suite.
Really?
They started a couple of years ago, yeah. And there's a couple of big companies in Europe, and also even financial institutions in North America using G Suite.
Not only, folks, does he do the weather, he also knows G Suite's large customers. That's awesome. No, but that's good.
Keep up, man.
Which, speaking of keeping up, this is a real interesting one. So my wife, who works for a large university, is in the process of migrating to Office 365. They're going from on-prem to Office 365, like most people probably do. The reason why this is so interesting to me is that my wife is the exact opposite of me in almost every way. Like, she's not a technical person. She's very much... if there's a problem, she comes to me. I got to remind her shiny side down on the DVD. She's just not a tech person. And so this migration,
you're a guy.
Yeah, this migration, don't get me wrong, I love my wife to death because she keeps me grounded. This migration is interesting because Dux right now, her inbox has 2 emails of everything. everything. And so she's
So where is she migrating from? Are they migrating from G Suite to Office 365, or tell me more about
no,
that
I
process.
believe, and I'm going to get called out on this because the IT pro that is doing this migration is actually probably listening to this podcast. At least one of them. Nick, if you're listening, hello, Nick. I believe they're definitely already on-prem, and they're going to the cloud. And so they're not going from a G Suite to Office. They're definitely on-prem going to the cloud. And the way I learned that she was doing this, she started complaining about double emails. But Dux, I'm not even joking. She was off work last week, and she said, "Hey, I was just added to a Microsoft team. What is a team?" And she had no idea. She uses Skype for Business, and so then I had to educate her on what this was. And it's interesting watching it from the other side rather than the technical side.
Sure, absolutely. And you bring up a good point, right? So first and foremost, the education sector, higher ed specifically, is a great use case for Microsoft Teams. In fact, Microsoft Teams has a special version for higher ed. The second point there is, just like anything else, tools are tools, right? It's important that proper use cases are promoted. And for your wife, depending on her role, is she a teacher? Is she part of faculty, or she's in the administrative office? There's different use cases that they can leverage Teams for. One thing I do want to plug, though, is AppPoint created a Microsoft Teams ebook specific to higher ed. So just go to our website, you'll find it. Feel free to download it and have a look at it. And it's intended for higher ed, not for IT people, but folks working in the higher ed.
I am it's not even a shameless plug. I am absolutely going to do that and give it to her. But Dux, this was probably right around the time were you at the announcement for Microsoft Teams by any chance?
Yes. Well, I wasn't physically there, but I watched, it was 2 years ago now, a little over 2 years.
Yep.
I watched a live stream when Satya announced.
Yeah. The only reason I'm going to put myself on my own little pedestal here, because I leaked all of Microsoft Teams. It used to be called Skype Teams at one point, and I had all this information out. And if you go back and watch that keynote, there's a transition point where they say we're going to bring an expert to come up and talk about Teams, and they called me out during the keynote, and I was sitting next to Mary Jo, and I about spilled water all over my laptop. But the only reason I bring that up is I showed that to my wife, and she could not have been any less impressed. She had no cares in the world about me doing my job.
Did she say the barrier was so low?
Wow, I get it from all sides. So is it raining there, Dux? It's kind of hard to tell. It almost looks sunny a little bit.
No, it's raining now. It was we started out drizzling. I think it's raining, but it's off and on all day like this.
Gotcha. Well, we appreciate your sacrifices for the greater podcast here. One of the questions that did come in, Dux, speaking of Teams, and you are our certified Teams expert, is we had a question come in that raised the issue about removing content from Team that is considered legacy. They said we went through several older migrations, and we were using Teams as the backbone for our communication hub, and now I'd like to either archive or get that information out of view. What is the best way to do this?
So it depends, right? Well, the way we think, so here's, in fact, this is a very timely topic because this is an area that I cover when I do these Teams governance workshops. So when I talk about governance, it's really looking at three areas. One is how teams are created. So in the conversation around provisioning, who can create it? Should teams be created versus just using SharePoint sites, etc. So that's one part. Second, once these teams are created, how do you manage it? How do you make sure people do the right thing? And then the last bit that I cover is thinking about the information lifecycle of a team, right? So first of all, do we really need to create a team for a single document? Or do we really need to create a team for the upcoming holiday party? And then once a team is created, the other conversation now becomes, how do we create channels? So let's say we're organizing our Thanksgiving potluck. Do we need a channel for every meal? And the reason why I bring this up, it's important because that goes into how you manage information, right? Because each channel will have multiple tabs. Multiple tabs can have various conversations and then documents, etc. So how do you clean it up? The first question is, you have to think about is the content you're working on, be it the conversation or the documents, is it bounded by any type of retention policy? Right? If you're working in highly regulated organizations, let's say you're bounded by Sarbanes-Oxley, where you have to keep financial related data for 7 years. So what do you do about that? If you're in the government sector, you have to fulfill the NARA mandate, which is the records management mandate. Now, for things that are, just day-to-day stuff, you want to get rid of it, I would say, make sure you enable the team's expiration capability where you can set, when teams expire, so you won't have that sprawl problem, which a lot of organizations dealt with back in SharePoint. And then lastly is in an automated way, let's say the team is not being used, be it with PowerShell or tools like AvePoint's Cloud Governance, have an automated way to monitor content that's not being used or teams and channels that's not being used. That way you won't have that sprawl, but more importantly, you won't have data that's sitting there that shouldn't be there.
Interesting. So, question on that automated side, when you automate something, do you get, let's say you automate something like, can you pick like February 15th, 2019 to archive? Do you get a prompt before that happens, or how does that process kick off?
That's a great question. The answer is yes, and it depends how you want the automation to take place. So, for example, with our technology, AvePoint Cloud Governance, you can define the automation based on last access. You can say, okay, if a team's not being accessed for 3 months, go contact the owner and see if they still want to use it or not. If not, because the owner is part of HR, let's archive it, right? Or because this team was part of a highly regulated project, let's move it to somewhere where we can do proper records management. So yes, the owner can be alerted, or if it's designated, let's say that team is just classified as, ad hoc team or just random stuff, then we don't have to ask the owner, we just chuck it. So yeah, so you can put a lot of these policies and rules and automate it so that it's one of those things that IT certainly has visibility into, but they don't have to worry about.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was the question, because obviously archiving is great and cleaning things up and keeping it nice and tidy is great, but you don't want it to be a surprise, because I'm sure, like many people, you kind of set it and then hopefully forget it, and then you need to, that prompt on the backside to be like, oh yeah, I actually need to go do that, and not have it automatically happen.
And speaking of automation, other than AvePoint's Cloud Governance, Tony Redmond, he's an awesome guy, writing a lot about how you could do this in PowerShell as well.
Yeah. And you can find all those awesome posts on Petri.com, by the way. Nice plug.
Petri, yeah.
He does a lot of that good stuff. And so, Dux, obviously we appreciate you standing in the rain here, but looking ahead a little bit, I know we'll have one more episode before officially 2019 kicks off, but I think a lot of people probably right now, ourselves included, probably you as well, are looking at budgets and looking at the year ahead. Any words of wisdom for people thinking about what to do in 2019, or just... we got budget planning. Nobody likes to do it, but we all got to do it. What's your words of wisdom for budgets?
So just looking at the industry and the landscape where most organization has moved to the cloud, moved to Office 365, frankly, is adopting Office 365, which is great. But as you budget, I highly encourage everyone to consider budgeting for how to drive sustainable adoption. And budgeting for that can mean different ways, right? It could mean training. It could mean automated tools to help users to do the right thing. Because while certainly Office 365, Microsoft 365 is a phenomenal platform, all these wonderful tools are great. But as more people adopt, the management side and the governance side could be rather challenging for IT. So consider that. It's continuous education, and definitely budgeting for automation is key.
There you go. Sustainable adoption. I think that's the key, right? It's one thing to just say, hey, you're gonna use this, but if you don't make it in a sustainable manner that people actually enjoy using, that's actually value add, that's a key.
And that's the thing, right? And I'm guilty of this. As IT in the past, when I think adoption is, let me send everyone to training for 3 days and they'll be great. But we all know it doesn't work that way. In fact, let me ask you this: how long does it take for a habit to stick?
Ooh, that is I know it's a lot. My gut says it's around 10, but I bet it's higher than that.
So on a personal level, it takes 21 days for a habit to stick.
Wow.
Now, there's actually a research done on enterprise technology deployment.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 15 to 18 months for organizations to adopt new technology.
Really?
So the question becomes, how are you driving the adoption process for it to stick, right? Sending people to 3-4 day training or watching a video won't cut it. And don't get me wrong. Don't think, oh, I got to spend all this money driving adoption and training. No, but you have to be intentional. You have to think about the sustainability of it. From how do people learn? Do you have lunch and learn? Do you send people to training? Do you make people watch shows like this? And then, especially these days, it's bite-sized learning, right? In addition, what other technology capabilities do you want to put in place so the sustainability of the platform is there as well?
Sage advice. That's a real interesting when you say 15 to 18 months, because what I thought of was that's one complete business cycle, right? That's a year of using the new platform, and then you got to get into the practice of using it for all your clients and all that good stuff. And so that's a hefty chunk of time.
Well, yeah, but then also there's benefit to it, right?
Sure.
No wonder, I hate to say this, SharePoint, for example, is a phenomenal platform. It's been around for over 15 years, but I guarantee you most SharePoint deployments in organizations today are nothing but a big file dump, right?
Yeah.
And because there was no intentional investment into driving sustainable adoption. And Office 365 certainly is much more than SharePoint. There's a lot of goodness. There's Teams, there's Planner, there's Yammer. All these tools, but we cannot expect our business to figure it out. The mistake is thinking, oh, they figure out Office, so they'll figure out Office 365. Wrong analogy.
Yeah, that is completely accurate. As I watch my wife kind of move through this migration stage, it's gonna be interesting. So, Dux,
okay,
it's time for your dish, man. I know you're in the rain. I know it's nasty outside, but what's going on in your life?
You know what, man? I'm just grateful. I'm serving a dish full of gratefulness with, work aside. Have an awesome family. My son turned 13.
Nice.
I actually gave him his first smartphone.
Uh-oh.
And he was so happy because prior to his smartphone, he had a flip phone. But I had to write a contract for him. So if you're interested to see that contract, I actually posted on LinkedIn. I posted on LinkedIn and I share that contract that you can use for your kids.
Yeah, my daughter is 5, so I'm hopefully about 7 years behind you, give or take. But that's awesome. I mean, it's a good time. Actually, Dux and I were hanging out last week for a little bit in DC when Dux wasn't on the road for once. But Dux, we very much appreciate your time and your insight for everything here, and hopefully you'll have a wonderful time in Brussels and everywhere else you're going, and hopefully you'll stay dry. But as always, man, we appreciate it, and we will catch you guys, everyone, actually, right back here next time on the Enterprise Dish.
Thank you. See ya.